Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Indian hawthorn, vose, raised beds, and apple cider vinegar. What do they all have in common? They're all viewer questions and we're going to answer them today. It's the Q&A show next on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Summer is just about over and we got lots of viewer questions this growing season. Today we're going to do a little catching up, questions we answered but did not have time to air. Let's start with one we get a lot this time of year, about mildew on flowers. How do I prevent mildew in my east-facing flower garden? And this is Carol from Windsor Locks, Connecticut. She says in late summer, the mildew gets on her peonies and some other flowers, but they come back every year. So can we help out Carol Celeste?
Sure, yeah. So I think, first of all, let's start with it's east facing. So that lets us know that that area is likely getting morning sun, afternoon shade. So morning sun is great for making sure that we get that rapid drying on foliage, especially when we get into the more humid periods of the year. In the morning time, there's lots of dew, and so if we're getting that east-facing sun, we're getting drying pretty quickly. So I'd say that she has that working in her favor. She did mention specifically that it's happening with her peonies and then some other flowers. So a couple of things to remember are several of our beloved herbaceous garden perennials are just prone to mildew. Peonies is one of those. And actually, I mean, I have several peonies. Towards the end of the summer, they look horrible.
Yes, they look ragged.
I mean, that's just what happens.
They sure do.
But it is not affecting the overall vigor or health of that plant. You know, if it is visually disturbing to you, you can actually go ahead, once they have deteriorated, substantially, you can go ahead and cut those leaves off because they're not contributing through photosynthesis at that point because they turn crunchy and brown at a certain point. So I don't usually recommend that people try to treat powdery mildew on a peony because that is just naturally going to happen in our garden environment. There's a handful of different common garden perennials that powdery mildew is just going to be an issue. So for those plants, that doesn't really concern me, right? But if it does concern them, I would say let's try to open up the garden a little more, make sure that we've got some really good air movement. That can also aid in drying. I know that wasn't a perfect solution, but now at least she knows that it's nothing that she's doing wrong. It just is.
It's pretty normal.
It's going to be normal. Yeah, but the good thing, going back to what you mentioned earlier, east-facing flower garden, morning sun. So it dries that dew off. It's a good time to water, of course. And so that's a huge advantage in my book.
And they're appreciating afternoon shade.
Yes.
I mean, especially
huge
here
advantage.
in the South, Mid-South, Southeast, plants are, even full sun plants, are appreciating some afternoon sun. I mean, shade. So that's nice.
Right. Yeah. So I think that works, Ms. Carol. So yeah, you have some choices there. Resistant varieties, do your homework. Yeah, they are out there. Check with your local extension service. They may have some for you. I have outdoor containers with elephant ears that have been very happy until some heavy rains. Now they look bad while putting out several smaller leaves. What do they need? And this is Terry from Lebanon, Tennessee.
Yeah. Well, I can see it was a heavy rain because the plant is appearing to look like it's a little too wet.
Right, it looks waterlogged.
Yeah, waterlogged. And container, she needs to make sure that container is draining because I saw it's sitting on the ground. So I'm wondering if the container is draining properly for her. That was the first thing that I wondered about. Next is if she wants to, after she makes sure that it's draining well and it's not wet, put a little fertilizer, liquid fertilizer with it. I wouldn't do much because it's the end of the growing season. You really don't want to promote too much new growth. And if you want to, I mean, I don't know if she wants to save it or not, but if she does want to save it, you know, she could let it dry out and put it in, you know, a place that doesn't freeze, and it would last until next year.
Yeah. So she has that option to do that.
She has that option, yeah.
Right. So I'm with you. It looked waterlogged to
Yeah.
me, and I do know for some plants, right, when they're stressed, drainage stress, if
Yeah.
you will, they produce plants that have smaller leaves, right? Because
Yeah.
they're trying to force itself to grow, right? So again, they're going to have newer, smaller leaves, right? But that's all due to stress.
Yeah.
Drainage stress.
Yeah.
Right. All right. But she has the option of maybe just kind of letting it go and
Letting it dry out. If she
letting it
wants to.
dry out. And,
But either way, if it's going to be outside and it's going to keep raining,
yeah.
we need to make sure it's draining.
right.
That's
I
what
would agree.
I'm worried about, that it's not draining.
I found this on an elephant ear leaf. What is it? And this is Joanna from Memphis, Tennessee. So what did you think of that picture? You know?
Well, it was hard to tell,
Okay.
but I can tell they're obviously caterpillars that have
Yeah,
hatched from the eggs that are on the leaf.
Yeah.
I don't know which ones they are. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
But you know what? I know how to get rid of them because they're all right there.
They're
I
right
would
there.
get a paper towel and I'd just take them all off, get rid of them.
Yeah, they all congregated in
They're all
one little
congregated.
area. It'll be easy to physically
Yeah,
remove
just
those.
physically
Is what
get
I
rid
would
of them.
do.
Yeah,
Right.
I would.
That'd be the easiest way to do that. If you see more, some of your elephant ears, then yeah, insecticide or soap, should help. Neem oil, something that should, help as well. Read and follow the label on those. But yeah, they're all congregated right there.
All right there,
So
easy.
physical removal, easy.
Get rid of them.
Yeah, just get rid of them that way. How do I stop moles, voles, or mice from eating my sweet potatoes? So Natalie, we're gonna start with you on this one, right? So moles, voles, or mice from eating sweet potatoes?
I mean, when we talk about those wildlife issues, I just think exclusion is really our best bet. I've mostly struggled with voles in areas of perennial plants. So they're a struggle in blueberries and things like that. So they are actually feeding on the roots of the plants. Actually, oftentimes it's a fall issue for those perennial plants. And so while you can trap, snap, I haven't seen as many issues or some of the more aggressive measures. Then I think for those small spaces, I would aim towards exclusion, hardware cloth, things like that.
Okay. Okay. So Celeste, you and I talked about this, right? But how do we know if it's moles or voles or mice?
Yeah.
How would we know that?
Well, that one's a little more complicated. I don't know how we would tell if it's mice, but if they're actually seeing damage on the sweet potatoes once they're dug up, I'm saying it's probably voles, because like Natalie said, voles are feeding on the roots of plants.
Right.
Moles with an M are underground, but they're not feeding on plants. They're eating insects. So I'm thinking that it's probably voles in this particular situation. And some indicators that you do have voles would be like, silver dollar size holes in the ground. And then sometimes you can see actually where they have like a little path that's trotted down between the holes.
Just a little trail.
It's like a little trail, like a little run, because they're underground feeding, but then they run on top of the ground and then dart right back into the next hole. So if you can find those little trails, put you a little, just the cheap mice snap traps, parallel to the trail. Don't put it in line with the trail, put it parallel to the trail. And so as they're just blindly running from hole to hole, it'll snap them. But you got to stay on top of it, and you got to change those out. It's not a foolproof control method for sure. Yeah.
No. And I actually know some people that would cover those snap traps with a pot.
Oh yes.
Right, because the voles are very secretive. They come out undercover.
They like to
Right. Yeah. So that may help. Is there something that will kill Creeping Charlie in strawberries? And this is Ernie on Facebook. So what do you think about the old Creeping Charlie, Peter?
Is there something that'll kill it in strawberries? Without killing the strawberries? No, there's not. I'm sorry. But there's a couple things you can do. You can wipe on an herbicide.
Okay.
You could either use a non-selective like glyphosate or triclopyr. You could use a broadleaf weed killer. Once again, wipe it on, don't spray it because it's going to kill your strawberries too.
Right.
I was doing some research just to make sure I had all the paths covered, just to check to make sure there was no chemical. And I actually read a recommendation, this is for lawns, that said if you have the problem in your lawn, a lot of times it's easier to just kill everything and reseed. So that brings up my next idea, which is perhaps it would be a good idea to this fall carefully dig up all your strawberries and then just spray all the Creeping Charlie.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then replant.
Okay.
Or maybe even move your strawberries to another place for a year while you really work on controlling this one area and then move them back. But yeah, that might end up in the long run being easier than just chasing your tail trying to get rid of it.
Another take on that same thought is if you have this perennial patch of strawberries, you can just do like a renovation. And so that's where you come in after their primary harvest has come in, and you can just tear up, like, say that it's, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there, an 8 foot wide by however long bed.
Right.
You just tear up the strip in the middle, and then you're going to be able to put a pre-emerge down in that middle, right? And that is going to help you start this weed control process. And then your 2 areas that you leave send out their runners, and they tack down into that area that you tilled up. So that's going to be your new fruit-bearing row the following year. And then the next year, you renovate the 2 sides that you left the year before. And so, once you get into year 2, you've started this rotation of weed control where you have been able to, not worry about spraying directly over strawberries, and you are starting with controlling in your renovation areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that's definitely another good option, right? Because think about strawberries, broadleaf plant, right? So you have to be
Mississippi
careful.
State has a really good a publication on strawberry renovation that could help you get on that rotation.
Right, that would be good. Yeah, Creeping Charlie is tough. Ground ivy. But here's something else too. Ground ivy actually likes damp, shady conditions. Right, so make sure it's not too wet in the area. Make sure you're getting full sun. And yeah, if you're gonna do renovation, if you're gonna kill, off, those plants, I would come back with a pre-emerge. Corn gluten meal, is something that's recommended that you can come back in with to kind of help suppress, those weed seeds of the Creeping Charlie, and then just kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Right, so that's what I would do, right, to slow it down. How do I get my tea olive to stand up straight? It was pushed by a hurricane. And this is Dennis from Evans, Georgia. So can we help Dennis out?
Yes, the best thing I could tell him to look at is probably see where he may need to prune something or whatever. And then at some point, I guess guy it or, stake it,
Right.
To get it back like he wants it. And also depend on the size of it as well.
Right. So yeah, I would definitely, suggest staking the tree, right? 2 or 3 stakes, right? So here's the thing about staking, right? So I would stake it low enough for stability, but high enough to keep the tree straight,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Then you want some slack in there,
That's right.
because you want the tree to be able to sway or move with the wind and build up that reaction wood.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't use wire, right?
Right.
Because the wire,
It cuts into it.
it's going to cut into the tree itself, right? So I'll
Yes.
probably use some soft ties or something like that.
Yes.
Again, make sure, you give it some slack. And then from there, Walter, I would make sure that you would water it and mulch it,
Yes.
is what I would do. And then the thing about staking, no more than about a year. So
About a
6
year.
to about 12 months.
Yes, and another old trick I use, if someone do want to use wire,
Okay.
at least take an old garden hose.
Yeah, I've seen
and
that.
and cut, put that over it,
I've seen
because you
that.
don't want it cutting into it.
Right,
You don't want
yeah.
it
That's the
cutting
whole thing about using the wire. So that's what I would do, Dennis. Yeah, so I
Yes.
would definitely, get it staked. Yeah, give it some slack. But yeah, again, low enough for stability, but high enough to keep it straight.
To keep it straight.
Water it, mulch it. I think that'll help you out. And then, as Walter said, if you need to prune it, it'd be a good time to prune
Yes.
it. What we'll call small sections to die on our 50-year-old Indian hawthorns. They receive full morning sun and afternoon shade, but no irrigation. And this is Mark from St. Petersburg, Florida. 50-year-old Indian hawthorns.
I'm
right?
impressed.
Yeah.
I think that they look fantastic. There's just a couple of dead places in them. I would cut those out.
I would.
And you know, I think it could be just airflow. I mean, they're so old that they may be just saying, hey, there's not enough airflow in this area, so they're, you know, hawthorns are susceptible to diseases when
They are.
it's too wet.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would make sure is that there's a little more airflow through the whole plant.
Right. So I would prune out the dead, like you mentioned, practice good sanitation, right?
Yes.
Pick up those fallen leaves. Indian hawthorns suffer with endomosporium leaf spot.
Yes.
Right. So I would look for those, and you could tell because they're going to be like orange, red, little, spots, on those leaves. So you definitely want to check for that. And also scales can be a problem with Indian hawthorn. So I would scout, look for those scales. If you don't have any of those, prune.
Yeah,
prune.
it's just air circulation
Get the air to
within
flow
the
in there.
plant.
The airflow in there, and
But they are beautiful.
yeah.
And yeah, a little pruning and a little scouting for diseases, and I think they'll be fine.
Hey, they'll be fine for the next 50 years.
Let's hope so.
Right, the next 50 years. I think that's pretty good because they're in the right conditions.
They sure are.
Right,
Look how well that has done.
so it has done good.
I'm amazed. That's great.
Can apple cider vinegar kill fungus? And this is Agatha from St. Louis, Missouri. So what do you think about that, Peter?
Can it kill fungus? Yes.
Yeah.
Studies have shown that acetic acid, which is the main part of vinegar, what gives it sour taste, can kill fungus. The catch is what exactly do you have in your kitchen in apple cider vinegar? What is its, how much do you dilute it? How much do you put on the plant? Is it not a good idea to use it when the sun's on the plant? Or do you have to use it in the morning? Or can you only use it between these temperature ranges? We don't know any of this.
Right.
So if you do want to use acetic acid on your plants, there are fungicides that are acetic acid, same thing as vinegar, that are labeled, and they have done all of the testing on it to know that, okay, this particular formulation, you need to dissolve it to this amount or dilute it to this amount. These are the conditions you need to apply it in. This is the interval. This is what it will control. This is what it will not control. And so I would suggest using that
Yes.
to figure out what you want to do. Now, if you just have some sooty mold on your sidewalk, yeah, put some vinegar on it and scrub. but if you're going to apply it to your plants, you probably need a little. I would suggest you go with the labeled fungicide.
Right. We're always preaching, label is the law. So
label.
we definitely want folks to use products that whose main purpose is meant to be used on plants.
Yeah.
So definitely, I agree with that.
Yeah,
Look
yeah.
for those products
You
that
need to
are
follow the
made
label.
for horticulture use.
Yeah.
And then we've got to be even more specific if this product is being used on like an ornamental plant versus an edible plant. So
Yeah.
That's good too.
just following those labels.
Yeah, there's so many different combinations of all this stuff, and they have, as part of getting that label, they have spent tons of money researching all of the different little permutations of this in order to make the label so it's accurate.
And something else I would like to add to that discussion is, so we're trying to kill a fungus. There are other means to do that. There are low impact fungicides that you can use as well.
Certainly.
Without even having to use, the vinegar.
Yes.
So there's some oils, out there that you can use, that can help out with that,
Even if you are an organic grower, you want something that's OMRI, like neem oil,
Yeah,
has
neem oil, right.
both
It's one of the oils.
insecticidal and fungicidal
right.
qualities. So that could be an option that has a label, and we know that that's its
I'd be
purpose.
much more willing to use neem oil than
Yeah.
Yeah.
kitchen vinegar.
I would go with the oils. Yeah, that's for sure. What ground cover do you recommend that I could plant instead of grass in a median under live oak trees? And this is John from Houston, Texas. So what do you think? In Houston, Texas was probably hot.
Yes, it's hot.
This summer.
I wonder if it's irrigated, They would be, hopefully it would be, because anything you plant is going to need some extra moisture
Right.
because of where it is in the middle of a road.
Right. I would agree.
But you can plant anything that's shallow rooted. And I'm thinking like monkey grass or mondo grass or vinca, the vincas, any kind of the vincas. It's not going to really go anywhere.
Yeah.
All of that stuff will be contained within the median, and it would grow and be underneath the tree.
Yeah, my thing about this is, yeah, you definitely would need something drought tolerant, shade tolerant,
Definitely.
for sure. So mulch is the first thing I thought about, but does want a ground cover. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. So Liriope,
Yeah.
which one would you go with? There's the spicata, Muscari, you know.
Either one. It depends on how tall
Okay.
he wants it.
Okay.
And now I would think that the Mondo grass,
Yeah.
you can get a dwarf Mondo grass. I love my dwarf Mondo grass.
Don't have to worry
It doesn't
about mowing. or
Never
cutting.
have to
Yeah.
worry about mowing
Right.
the dwarf Mondo grass, and it will spread underneath there.
Okay.
So, but it will be expensive to put all that in. But anything you plant in the median we're talking a lot of plants. So,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But we're thinking those.
but those will
Plant
be
selections would be
those will
good.
be in Vinca minor. It will root and keep going. You need less of that because it just spreads
Right.
faster than the Mondo grass is more of a bunch type, and it just from the center it keeps expanding, whereas the Vincas run.
Okay. Got it. I think those are good options. I would stay away from ivy. You don't
No,
want
no,
anything to
not ivy.
climb the live oak tree.
That's really
So I would stay away
one
from
of the
that.
noxious weeds in the United States,
Right.
really. So
I would
yeah,
stay away from that, Mr. John. That is for sure. And I also will stay away from plants that need frequent watering.
Yes.
Right, because you don't want to rot the roots of the live oak
No,
tree.
No.
How often should you aerate your lawn? Guess who we're going to for this question? What do you think about that, Joseph?
Yeah, at minimum, every 3 years.
Every 3 years?
It's not going to hurt to do it once a year, every year, but at minimum, every 3 years. Especially if you're seeing some issues with drainage. If it starts getting worse, it may be time to bump up that aeration.
Right.
And that can kind of help improve it. If you start seeing some health issues with your turf, just not looking as good, maybe time to get it to hit it up again.
So how does aeration work, though? Can you tell us that? How does it work?
So aeration, so you have your soils and they just naturally get compacted, walking over them, gravity, maybe it's a sports field, whatever, it just gets a lot of traffic. And as it gets compacted, the roots have trouble working their way through the soil. Water has issues working their way through the soil to get to the roots. So it just kind of gets tight in there, and there's not a whole lot of room to move. So you come in with, there's different types of aeration, but generally we do a core aeration. And it's a big machine, and it rolls over the turf, the yard, and it pulls out plugs.
Yeah.
And that just alleviates that compaction and just loosens up everything. And you can leave the plugs in the ground, they'll break apart, work their way back into the soil. Or you can rake them up and remove them. It's just, however you want to do it.
I've also seen aeration been used in this plug style to help break down thick thatch layers, right? So after the plugs are out, then they run over the turf to kind of break up that those soil plugs, and it helps break down if you've got that thicker thatch layer. So I've seen that be effective
So
too.
aeration and dethatching kind of go hand in hand. You want to keep up on that dethatching too,
What
especially in
time-
zoysia grasses. They don't like a lot of thatch.
Yeah.
What time would be the best time, do you think?
For aeration and dethatching, both when the grass is actively growing. So our warm season grasses now, June, July period, and then for our cool season, our fescues, in the fall is actually a better time.
All right.
I can
believe-
see me out in my yard trying to pull
Trying to figure it
plugs
out.
one by one. Doot, doot.
Trying to figure it out.
And I've done that too, where you can't get around the houses or buildings, the corners. You just take a pitchfork, and just kind of break that up a little bit. So,
Okay.
got a small area, you can do things like that as well.
What is the best material to use to line the bottom of a raised bed? And this is Ginger from Millington, Tennessee. It's a good question.
It really is, because basically we build, the raised beds.
Right.
And really, what I would like to do is have a small layer of gravel at the very bottom
Okay.
of the bed.
Okay. Okay.
To kind of help with the drainage and all of that,
right.
And then I think you'd be fine. If you want to put a layer of sand on top of the gravel,
Okay.
depends on how deep that your a raised bed will be.
Right.
And then from there, the rest of it just be, you know, soil and
Right.
composting materials and things like that. But I think it wouldn't hurt to have just a small layer of, you know, of gravel at the very bottom.
Okay.
You know, allow for some good drainage.
Right. And I know there's some other options, you know, that, you know, we could discuss. Landscape fabric is one I know that some
Sure.
people use.
Sure.
The thing about the landscape fabric, over time, it will break down.
Right. That's
but
right.
It does allow for, you know, for water to penetrate, you know, down into that soil. Or hardwood cloth, just thought about. That's something
Yes.
you can use, you know, as well. It's more expensive.
Right,
But the thing
right.
about the hardwood cloth is you don't have to worry about voles. You won't be able to get through.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So,
true.
I mean, that's something. And then, of course, you know, being with the Master Gardeners, you know, the Master Gardeners always use cardboard
Right.
newspaper.
That's right.
Right.
That's
So you
right.
can use that. The thing about that is it will break down.
That's right.
You know, over time. So you have to, you know, get that replenished.
And that's why I kind of like the gravel,
That's why
because
you
it's
like
not going to break
gravel? Yeah.
down
Right,
over
right,
time.
right.
You know, and they'll sit there and get, you know, pretty steady for you.
Okay. Yeah. So the gravel, or, you know, if you want to go with bare ground, you can do that too. You
can do that
know what I
too,
mean? I mean, it
yes.
allows the roots, you know, to get down into that
Yes.
that soil, get
Yes.
those nutrients. You have to fight the weeds.
Yes. Yes.
But bare ground, and you would get good, you know, if it's in a good drain area, you know, the drainage would be better.
That's right.
But yeah, don't have to use anything.
Right.
You know,
Right.
just fight the weeds.
Just kind of depends on your situation and
Depends on
what
the
you want to
situation.
spend.
Right, and what you want to spend. That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly right. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is questions@familyplotgarden.com. And the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. To get more information on anything we talked about, go to familyplotgarden.com. On the website, we also have answers to probably close to 2,000 gardening questions. So, if you have a question, we may have already answered it. If not, you can ask us your question right from the website. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.